Emergency episode of the Bruin Bible. We've got a big story coming out of Eugene. Mario Cristobal stepping down as the head coach at the University of Oregon, going back to his alma mater, University of Miami. And there's a lot of implications about Chip Kelly maybe heading to Eugene. We are joined by LA Football Network founder Ryan Dyrud, big legend. How you doing tonight, Big Ryan?
What's up, brother? I'm doing great. Happy to be on with you to talk fans off a ledge, depending what side they're on. I think everyone's on a ledge regardless, so I'm ready to get into it.
Jay-Z has a great line. He's not a businessman, he's a businessman. Look at the AirPods in there for Ryan. You got to love it. Our boy Jamal, right below him, an absolute boss, one of the best writers we have on staff. Jamal, how's it going tonight out in Los Angeles?
Oh, well, Will, excited to jump into this. I mean, it seems like there's never a dull moment in college football here these last few days, for sure.
It has been crazy to say the least. Cristobal officially accepting the position at Miami, and everyone from Colin Cowherd to John Canzano, the beat reporter from the Oregonian, are saying Chip Kelly is the number one target there. There's something on Sportsline saying that Chip Kelly is the odds-on favorite to potentially be the next Oregon coach if you're a gambling person. How serious do you think this is? A chance from 0 to 100, where would you rate the odds of Chip Kelly becoming Oregon's next head coach and leaving UCLA? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Man, I mean, just my own opinion, I would put it at 0%, but you have to give credit to some of these guys that are probably smarter than me. They have more sources. Mine's more of just a gut feeling and logic, I think, feeling. But if they're hearing things, then I guess there has to be some credibility to it. So I guess I can waver up to about 20%. But for me, Will, it just doesn't make a lot of sense because I don't see Oregon being the program that would bring back, I'm not calling Kelly a retread in the sense that he's bad, but just bring back someone from their glory days, trying to rekindle that. I think they're one of those programs that seems to be more progressive and would move on and find someone else to kind of take them into a new direction. I think Chip is happy down at UCLA. I think he's built something. It's in his fourth year. They finally have a winning season and go into a bowl game. And I think he's kind of liked his life down here in LA and what's kind of came about that. But, I think and we'll get into it more, but the why there's more speculation and the percentages are going up is because Chip is going into his last year at UCLA. So if Oregon does want him and they say, hey, we'll give you 5-6 years, X amount of dollars, and he's here at UCLA on his final year with no stability, then it would make sense for maybe to jump on that and have stability going back home. So a lot to unpack, which we'll get into on this whole emergency pod, but just in my opinion, Will, I go 0 to 20%. I just don't see it happening. I think it just makes sense for him to stay here in Westwood.
0 to 20%. I like that feeling. I would personally love to have Chip Kelly come back. Anyone that's listened to the pod throughout the year, I feel like he's finally just finding his footing in Westwood. Things are starting to flow for him offensively. Obviously, Azanaro needs to go. I think every UCLA fan can agree with that. But let's try to keep Chip in Westwood. Jamal, I hope we can kind of keep the same percentage around there. What do you think the percentage chance is that Chip moves on to Eugene?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan completely from the standpoint of Chip and from the standpoint of UCLA. I actually put it at 60 to 80 with this Oregon situation. And the reason I say that is, Oregon is new rich in college football, right? There's sort of old money, new money. Oregon's definitely new money, and they're new money because of Chip Kelly. And if you look at all the coaches after Chip, Helfrich, Willie Taggart for a year, and now Cristobal, Helfrich had all his success was early off a Chip system and then flamed out. Mm-hmm. Taggart was there a year, 7-6 before he went to Florida State. And then Cristobal, truthfully, had sort of a Helton-like run at Oregon, if you really think about it. He won the Rose Bowl with Herbert and didn't do really much else. I mean, even the guys on ESPN were kind of saying, how good really is Cristobal? We don't really know yet in terms of the body of work. So that to me is step one. Step two, I think it's process of elimination in terms of the other candidates. And I think we're going to get into this, but I think there's probably about 5 other candidates at play. And for a variety of reasons, I don't know if they're going to make that jump. And I think that puts Chip right at the forefront of this conversation. And C, I really hope that Bruin Nation rallies around Chip, because I believe he's the absolute right guy for this job. But who knows, where maybe Chip's not feeling the love from the fans. And maybe that's a tipping point for him to go to Oregon. I think that there's two types of jobs really in college football. There's the build jobs and there's the buy jobs. And the buy jobs are those programs that have the recruiting pipeline, that have the brand, that have had contemporary success, where they can kind of put a coach in and they can kind of snap their fingers and go pretty quickly. Brian Kelly at LSU, if Saban were ever to leave Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame to a certain extent, those are those kind of buy jobs that and Lincoln Kelly at USC to a certain extent, where if I buy the right coach, I can get going by year 2. But there are build jobs and there are build programs, the Wisconsins, the Iowas, the Iowa States, the Northwesterns, where for a variety of reasons, whether it's geography, whether it's academics, whether it's politics, you need someone to be able to build. It's not that easy to turn it around that quickly. And I think where UCLA fans have kind of talked them off the ledge, I think a lot of fans think this is just UCLA is a buy job, and UCLA is not a buy job. UCLA is a build job. And that's why people think that they can just snap their fingers and get the success that Kelly had at Oregon right away. He has built this for the first couple of years, and we're about to reap the benefits of that success. Let's really show him that love. He's the right guy, and let's do what we can to keep him.
I am fully on board with everything you just said, Jamal. I think UCLA fans don't know how good they have it, because when I think of Oregon football, the first guy I think of, it's not a particular player, it's not anyone from that era, it's Chip Kelly. Like, that is the guy I think of. And in his 4 years as a head coach there, 46-7 was in the top 10 each year, and he really flipped college football on its head with his offense. And boy, did we kind of see a jump this year when he got the personnel and players involved there to do things in Westwood this season. I think for me, the thing that I'm worried about is the contract's up. Jarman, he's a new athletic director. That could not be his guy. He may not be feeling it from the fans, but he may not also be feeling it from the front office there. You know what I mean? Jarman could be looking elsewhere. He may have a guy in mind that he could replace. The interesting factor in all this, and I think the longer this plays out, it could potentially be worse for UCLA fans if we were to lose Chip.
Really bad.
January 18th, they paid nothing for a buyout for Chip Kelly. Nothing. So before then, it's a $9 million buyout, but once it reaches January 18th, he can walk to Oregon, the school that he built as a football powerhouse, for nothing. So that is what I'm worried about the most. I think there's a really good chance that he does go back there. I think I'm kind of in the middle between both of you guys. I would say 35 to 45% that he heads to Oregon, which is still a pretty high number if you do look at it. I think there's where there's smoke, there's fire, and I trust a lot of the sources that are saying Oregon's interested. This is their guy. This is the guy they want to bring back, given all the success they've had.
Well, and Will, I think what's most concerning if you're a Bruins fan, and I'll turn it to you guys to comment on this too, but early signing period from the time of this recording starts in 9 days. And so if Chip were to jump ship, let's say this week, and go back to Oregon, well, now UCLA, they're not being able to recruit during this early signing period. They have to have, like, Martin Jarman needs to either go to Chip tonight with a bag of money and a contract saying, we believe in you, we want you to stay, here's this, or he needs to have someone on speed dial that can get here to LA by private jet within 3 hours that Chip leaves. Because if they do that, it's going to set this program back even further than what it was just 4 years ago, because all of a sudden you miss out this entire window and everything that has been built is just going to be torn back down, and you bring someone in around Christmas before the bowl game, and you're looking at, a big loss in the recruiting game. So that's my biggest concern for this whole thing. And it's funny, Jamal, I had you on my show last week, and we were almost laughing like, no shot. This is like silly to even talk about. And now we're actually talking about like it's a reality that could happen, which is scary.
Yeah, Ryan, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the thing that makes me a little bit worried is right before Cristobal left for Miami, there was a lot of conversation about a new contract that Oregon was going to give Cristobal. And they said it was going to be in that Michigan State, LSU, USC ballpark of 8 to 9 million a year for Cristobal. Even if you argue that this current iteration of Chip is not worth 8 or 9 million, that only strengthens Oregon's argument. Can you imagine getting Chip at 6.5, 7 million and then having the money left over to do the buyout of the 9 million at UCLA? And then UCLA is in such a difficult spot with early signing period, not having a coach in place. It could really be catastrophic. And what makes me very nervous is all of the things that maybe Chip is a little bit deficient in is a perfect complement at Oregon. You know, he's not a great recruiter, but take a walk on Oregon's campus and look at those Nike facilities. They're going to sell themselves. If they make one phone call, maybe get Dante Williams back to Oregon, you know, now you've got the complement that Chip needs. And you know, Chip has been able to build the number one offense in the Pac-12 with DTR and with guys that he's developed. Can you imagine Chip with Ty Thompson? And can you imagine Chip with 3 consecutive top 10 recruiting classes and those facilities? You know, it's kind of staggering what he can do. The guy hasn't forgotten how to coach. And if anything, it's a stronger situation. It's almost like Saban going to Alabama after he experimented with the NFL, realized the NFL wasn't for him. And he said, you know what, I'm going to spend the rest of my career in college. Chip has sort of experienced that too with the Eagles and the Niners. If he comes back to Oregon and say, this is going to be home for the rest of my career, he could really build something again the way he did. And that's my big concern as a UCLA fan and as a UCLA writer in the ecosystem.
And I'll take it a step further. I think if he does go to Oregon, I think that team's a top 6 team next year in the hunt for the college football playoff immediately with Chip Kelly there. Like you said, 3 straight top 10 recruiting classes. Chip Kelly knows how to coach. It took him a while to get his players in at UCLA, but when they finally did, things started clicking. Like you said, Ty Thompson, former 5-star quarterback there. He's got the guys already at his disposal to make something happen on offense. And let's be honest, Chip Kelly was sniffing around. Ben Bolch had that, question at the press conference. Is he going to go to Washington? That was a question that was there. Who knows if there's any legitimacy to that? But if he was even thinking about going to Washington, you don't think he would think about going back to Oregon, where he dominated college football and has probably still a lot of great friends and family in that area? I think that's very likely to be the case. I want to spin this to the potential coaches that could go to UCLA if Chip Kelly does leave. And, as we mentioned earlier, we want Chip at UCLA. We do not want him to leave. We think he's the right guy for the job. But if he were to leave, I do want to start with my first coach, and it would be a big get to get this guy, given how he's turned around Baylor this past year, Dave Aranda. The reason I give this one more of a shot is he's from Kern County, California. He's a California native. It would be a big upgrade. Baylor, to me, is not a destination job whatsoever. I think even as successful as they've been, they've got a Heisman Trophy in the last decade plus. They just won the Big 12. They're still going to be the 3rd or 4th most popular team in the Big 12 at best. So going to UCLA, you have a chance to kind of, come to a bigger program. I think UCLA is going to be on a much bigger stage given what USC is about to do with Lincoln Riley. Dave Aranda is a wonderful defensive genius. I mean, he coached up that LSU defense, coached up Wisconsin's defense before taking his first head coaching gig. Jamal, I'll start with you on this one. What would you think about Dave Aranda coming if Chip Kelly were to leave?
Oh, it'd be a Grand Slam hire. That would be an absolute Grand Slam hire. I wonder, though, that potential likelihood. I think that, in sort of a weird way, I'm not sure if he wants to chase Lincoln Riley around throughout the country. And I think that even though I agree with you, Baylor is not a destination job, I think there's a sense in the Big 12 right now that things are wide open. Venables took the OU job, but Venables is a defensive guy. Aranda's a defensive guy. Mike Gundy's a defensive guy. All of a sudden, the playing field is very level in the Big 12. And you don't have to deal with the SEC. You can still win. And now you don't have to deal with this sort of offensive genius taking all these skill guys in that region. I actually think Aranda potentially has a really nice situation for himself for the next couple of years at Baylor if they're willing to kind of re-up him, and all indications are that they're willing to pay the big money to keep him around. So I think the world of Aranda as a program builder. I'm just not sure the likelihood given the dynamics at play, both geographically as well as financially.
I totally agree with that. And we've been making this point all year when we had Chip on the hot seat. If you're going to fire Chip or you're going to lose Chip, you've got to compete with big name programs to get the next coach. Notre Dame has got to fill a coaching vacancy. Oregon's got to fill a coaching vacancy. Granted, that might likely be Chip Kelly, but you never know. You know what could happen. We want to keep Chip here. Hopefully we're not competing against the likes of Notre Dame for our next coach. But Ryan, what would you think about Dave Aranda coming out to UCLA?
Yeah, huge. And, real quickly, I just want to mention before I forget about it, another name. I know, Jamal, you don't agree with this just from our chat, which I'm not saying I agree with it either, but I saw Ducks beat writer for 247 in one of their, I don't think he tweeted it out, but in one of their chat rooms, talked about how, based on his sources, there's actual interest from Oregon in, Wilcox from Cal. So another name that linked that, hey, I know we would root for that because that means Chip's not leaving, but I just want to at least throw that out into the universe. That's one of the Ducks guys said there is actual interest. I don't know how much interest, but it's out there. As far as Aranda goes, though, Will, I mean, 100% it's a slam dunk hire. If Chip were to leave, because he could come in, we see what he did in such a short time with Baylor. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure Baylor's a private university, meaning they are private, correct?
They are, yeah. They do have. They can. Really
they got a lot more resources and a lot more money. And if we're worried about UCLA trying to compete with Oregon in paychecks, then UCLA has no shot with a private school like Baylor. So unless he really wants to move back to California and live in LA, and he loves Martin Jarmond that much and wants to live in Westwood, I don't see any shot that they are able to get him. But hey, if they did, slam dunk, would love it.
If that's the case, I need our UCLA boosters to step up like the USC ones did for Lincoln Riley. We need to make that happen. I'm going to flip it to a guy that you've always liked, Ryan, and I am a huge fan of. I Googled everything that he has. 77-48 career record, 3-time Big 12 Coach of the Year at Iowa State. Matt Campbell's impressive. I think the most impressive coaches to me are the guys that continually win year in and year out without having those high-level recruits. And Campbell's just done that. He is an impressive talent in the coaching realm. What would you think about Matt Campbell potentially coming to UCLA?
This would be my guy, and one that I think could actually happen. Not saying that UCLA or Jarmon's interested in him. But again, I want to keep saying this. Our guy is keeping Chip. But if this were all to leave, and if we had to go after someone, Matt Campbell would be my number one choice. Just 1 week ago, maybe 2, if my, the timeline's gone so fast, Matt Campbell was one of the hottest names in the coaching carousel. He was one of the guys that could he be linked to USC? Could he be linked to LSU? And then all of a sudden these big programs go and grab coaches that are still, employed by their programs. And everyone's kind of forgot about Campbell. And at this point, it looks like he's just going to be back at Iowa State. And I think, the biggest thing for him is, does he want to be a West Coast guy? He seems kind of more like a not Central America, but Midwest guy in his kind of demeanor and repertoire. But to me, UCLA is certainly an upgrade over Iowa State. I mean, that's no question. They're both public universities, so the money's the same. I know what he's built at Iowa State, but he would already be coming to a program that has more wins this year in UCLA than Iowa State did this year. So I think it would be an upgrade there. So that's a fit in that way. The money would be the same. And then we know what he does in building with the recruiting pool he has at a school in Sioux City, Iowa. I think what he can do out in Westwood. I know he's competing, with the likes of Lincoln Riley now, but it's still, he was competing in Iowa back then and he's still integrated. So that to me would be the hire that I think they would have to go out for. And it's one that, in my opinion, could actually happen.
And this is all hypothetical, Bruins fans. We obviously want Chip back, like Ryan was saying. But if they were to replace him, these are the coaching candidates we're thinking about. We should put that out in the air if there is a major change to be had. Jamal, give me your thoughts on Campbell. I think he's a solid candidate.
Yeah, Will, and I think, in the Plan B scenario of if Chip walks, I think this guy is Plan B-A. He's Plan B1 because I think so many of the things that Ryan mentioned, he's a builder. Again, it's the buy versus the build. He's the guy who's a builder, like Pat Fitzgerald, like Kurt Ferentz, like Paul Christ. You need guys that know how to build programs given certain dynamics of the university. And I think he does that really effectively. He did it at Toledo. He's done it at Iowa State. And I think the other piece where there's so much synergy is the values. Iowa State is in the heart of the Midwest. Those Midwestern values are very strong in terms of kind of family, community, doing things the right way, being a complete student athlete. And that's really, UCLA is sort of the gem of all of those things in the West Coast, the school that does everything the right way, the pedigree with academics, with social justice, with having well-rounded student athletes in the community. I think there's so much of that Matt Campbell can kind of bring and synergize. And if he, much like Lincoln Riley, kind of wants a new challenge and a new chapter out West, this would be really a home run get for UCLA, and one I think that's attainable and reasonable, and one that really is within the ilk and the ethos of the university.
I like Campbell as well. I think he's just very, very impressive and some guy that we should really keep a tab on if something does explode. The next guy I got 2 years ago was arguably one of the hottest coordinators going into the coaching ranks, decided to take a job in the NFL and just got released this past week. Joe Brady. I mean, this guy broke records at LSU in the SEC, arguably the most explosive offense in the history of college football if you break down the stats. Didn't think he got a fair shake in Carolina, given the quarterbacks he had there were Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, and Cam Newton. I don't know. Those are pretty tough guys to run an offense with in the current day. Joe Brady. I mean, all hypothetical, like we said earlier, but Jamal, give me your thoughts on Joe Brady potentially coming to UCLA.
I like Brady, and I don't like him as much as Campbell, but he would kind of be my second choice. I think the pro cons with Brady are, like you said, he's, what an incredible track record with LSU, arguably the greatest team in the history of modern college football. And it certainly wasn't because of Ed Orgeron. It was because of Joe Brady and that offense. I think so. A lot of positives there. It'd be his first head coaching job. I think he'd be really excited. He'd bring a fresh energy, a new energy. And again, that pedigree that recruits can recognize, that, hey, this really was the engine behind that great LSU team. I think the concern with Brady is sample size, where, has he done enough at enough places? That LSU team was just so stacked. I mean, you're talking about Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase as wide receiver. You're talking about two Pro Bowl / All-Pro, NFL wide receivers playing in college. Talking about Thaddeus Moss as your tight end, an NFL tight end. Edwards-Helaire as your running back, who's basically the engine of the running game with the Chiefs. And then, oh, by the way, Joe Burrow, your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, who's going to be a star and has already become a star in the NFL. There's just so much NFL talent there playing a college game. You wonder, who really was responsible for what, how much of it is correlation, how much of it is causation. And so for me, the only question with Brady is sample size. But again, I think a very bright young mind and, something I would not be unhappy with if UCLA got, certainly.
I mean, that's a great consolation prize if we were to lose out on the big fish. Ryan, give me your thoughts on Brady. I'm a big fan of this guy.
Yeah, I love the offensive mind, the talent there. For me as a head coach, he would actually be a little further down my list because of everything Jamal just said. Only 1 year at LSU. Everyone forgets that, and Jamal kind of touched on it. But having all that talent and what he did with it was great. But then he was seen kind of after that year as this next like Sean McVay wonderkind, still only 32 years old. I mean, the dude's my age. So it's insane how young he is, but he was seen as the next kind of Sean McVay going to the NFL. And then I get what you're saying. Well, not a ton of, probably needed more time. But Sean McVay, when he moved up quickly in the ranks, like he was always successful. He made Kirk Cousins a $28 million quarterback. That was Sean McVay. That's who he instituted with in that system out in Washington before he got his head coaching gig. So it concerns me a little bit that once the talent level wasn't quite there, the inconsistencies in his offensive play calling that we saw in Carolina kind of really bled through. Now, I don't think he would be – I think he is going to be a great offensive coordinator again, and I would love him more in that role. If UCLA went with him as a head coach, I wouldn't absolutely hate it because I think he still has that year in LSU to show recruits, hey, we can get to that pinnacle again. He's young, he's hip, he would fit here in LA. I think he has that vibe, that culture. So I wouldn't by any means hate it. I just think the lack of experience and based on what this program has been through already, you're taking a huge gamble on a guy that if it doesn't work out, it just puts this program further and further down. So I wouldn't hate it, but I'm a little different from you guys that he would be a little farther down for me personally.
That's totally fair. I do want to throw out that McCaffrey, the centerpiece of that offense, was injured for most of his time there too, which was a huge loss. So I don't think he ever got a fair run there. I'm a Joe Brady believer. Whether he does it in the NFL again or not, this guy can clearly coach the college level, doing that at the SEC. I think he would be worth, looking around for if the opportunity was there. The last two guys I got, Ryan, are PJ Fleck and Kalani Sitake at Minnesota and BYU, respectfully. Two very well-qualified coaches. I expect PJ Fleck to be in on the Notre Dame potential hire there. I think that's a real match that I think could potentially happen, but who knows? Ryan, PJ Fleck or Sitake, these are two, prominent head coaches out there that could be looking on to maybe move on to the next position. Out of those two guys, which one would you like more from Minnesota and BYU, respectively?
I mean, I love PJ Fleck. I think what he did at Western Michigan and then going to Minnesota. But I think he also, and there's like so many of these going on, but I'm pretty sure he was extended also at Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken. So, already got a big payday. And so obviously you can still go after a guy, but UCLA is just not going to open the pocketbooks and go outbid and pay for someone's buyout at an already program. So I don't see that happening. I would love it. I love PJ Fleck. He was a guy I was liking him for USC even. That's how highly I think of him. So I think he would have been great for USC. Sitake's interesting. And I mean, we've seen what he's built at BYU, a program that it's a hard program to coach anyway, because the way that school works, and especially with the Mormon faith, you have so many players coming in and then leaving for their mission for 2 years, and he continually keeps them competitive, and he's able to get those guys back. And I know they're older and playing at a high level, but the fact that he's able to groom guys, leave, have them come back, keep grooming them, and they're continually in the top 25 year in and year out, I think it's extremely impressive what he's built there. So he had ties to the USC job as well. Obviously, I think Lincoln Riley was a better hire for USC, but Sitake is a guy that I think would be a solid hire for UCLA. And he's also been linked to Oregon. So he's obviously a guy that is highly sought after now in circles. And so if it were to come down to it, I would rather have Sitake than Joe Brady if I'm being honest there. So that would be my echelon, would be Matt Campbell would be my number one, and probably Sitake would be number two.
Wow, Sitake number two on that list. That's a big swing there for Ryan. Jamal, where are you going with Sitake?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of his as well. And I think that what he's done at BYU is remarkable. He's really infused them with energy. I go back to attainability being really low with Sitake. And the reason for that is Sitake is LDS. He is Mormon. He has coached his entire coaching career of 20 years between an assistant and a head coach has been exclusively in Utah, except for 1 year where he was an assistant elsewhere. I feel like in terms of his family life, his spirituality, his values, I think he's already in his dream job in much the same way the Navy coach or the Army coach, sometimes these jobs are kind of higher callings. I have a hard time believing, that he will leave this dream job. Everyone forgets he played for Lavelle Edwards at BYU. And so it goes very deep at BYU. And B, I'm not sure culturally and sort of in terms of his faith and spirituality and how he sees the world, when you take him out of kind of an LDS program in that LDS world, I'm not sure he's going to be as effective. And so I think the world of him. I think he's going to be a stud for the next 10 or 20 years, but I see him staying at BYU and building something great there. And so I think the world of him, but I think, again, it's one of those where I think attainability is low for very different reasons than Aranda. But I think that really it's sort of a Matt Campbell, Joe Brady for me as 1-2 because of the attainability piece.
Yeah, I think I would go. I'm going to take a big swing myself. I think Joe Brady would fit what we're doing. I like the young, heavy hitting offensive power to kind of match Lincoln Riley if we're going for rivalry for the future. I think I'd have Matt Campbell number two. My thing with Sitake is I completely agree. He is overperformed at BYU, in my opinion, because that is such a tough school to recruit for, get people to come in, because you're buying into a whole religion, let alone everything else. And he's done a phenomenal job there, 48-28 in his career there as a head coach. He's been awesome. fellas, this was a great exercise. I do want to get into our NC State preview.
Real
Before we
quick,
do that,
Will.
we got to get a sponsorship in from
Real
my
quick, Will.
bookie. Yep.
Let me throw a name. Let me throw one name at you. You know I got to
Hit
jump
me.
in. You know I always do that. Got to jump in on your
No,
show.
hit me, brother. Yeah.
I'm curious your guys'
we're all
thoughts on
yours.
this. I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this, and I haven't put a ton of thought into it, but just on the surface, it does make some sense too. San Diego State head coach Brady Hoke. Now I know he's had kind of an up and down career, but has a lot of experience. You know, coached at Michigan, Oregon State, coached in the NFL at Carolina, been a D-line coach. He's a defensive guy. And now I know San Diego State had that horrible loss to Utah State just a week ago, but he's built that program up 11-1 this year going into that championship game. And he's in Southern California already. So he's already recruiting in the Southern California area. So it seems like a pretty simple pipeline to just move up the 5 freeway an hour and a half. So what's your guys' thoughts on a potential Brady Hoke hire?
Brady Hoke would be pretty fantastic. I knew him from his Michigan time period. I think that's such a tough job. There's so much pressure on that position, especially during the Ohio State years when they were surging. And that was right when Urban Meyer had gotten there. So it made things a little bit tougher. Hoke could always recruit, though. He could always get these, high-level 4-star guys, even brought in a couple 5-star dudes while he was there. I think for recruiting purposes, UCLA, that would be a home run. And he's clearly doing it at San Diego State, like you said, 11-1. I think they just won their conference championship, if I'm correct. So they've been balling. The guy can recruit at any level. Get him at UCLA. We're getting those high 4 stars. What do you think about that, Jamal?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, Ryan. I think regionally, geographically, I think it works. I still have a really bad taste in my mouth with Brady Hoke with Michigan. The gargantuan nature with which he flamed up in Michigan, I think is a tough sell for me. I think it's one thing to sort of succeed in non-Power 5 jobs, and then, it's a different animal to be Power 5, especially considering what this landscape could look like. The hypothetical world we're living in here in this exercise is Chip is at Oregon, Lincoln Riley's at USC. Stakes are really rising here. And so I like him, but I think much like you, Ryan, in terms of looking at Joe Brady more as an offensive coordinator, I see Brady Hoke more as a recruiting coordinator, associate head coach, not quite leading man.
I think agreed, man. And before we get to the NC State preview, I do want to throw in a sponsor for one of LAFB's main ones, MyBookie. Make sure to check us out using the promo code LAFB. They got everything you're looking for all the games coming up this weekend. Some NFL football. Bet on your Rams this upcoming weekend, folks, using the promo code LAFB. NC State, fellas, we got the Holiday Bowl in San Diego. Ryan will be down there. Jamal is likely to be down there. I've got to figure some stuff out, but it's likely I'll be there too.
Let's go.
The band's getting back together, boys.
Yeah.
It's been fun time in San Diego. And I started looking up NC State because there are some different coasts. I don't really as familiar as some of the Pac-12 teams. This is a very good football team. Dave Doran, the head coach for NC State, 87-53. As a coach there at NC State. He's been coaching there since 2013. They've got a top 25 defense, and the guy that really stood out to me is this Devin Leary quarterback. I watched some tape on him. This dude's electric. 35 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 3,500 yards, and 65% completion percentage. I don't know why we're not talking about this guy more. This guy should be a little bit talked about in the NFL draft coming up in a few months. Ryan, what was your impression when UCLA landed NC State in the bowl game?
Yeah, well, as we talked about last time we were with you, Will, obviously the big fish we all wanted was Clemson. I think that was the hope for the name there. And then there was the shot at Pitt, with Kenny Pickett as a potential, Heisman candidate and a first-round pick at quarterback. And then it went down the list to Wake Forest. And it's like, okay, well, Wake Forest is a one-loss team, and they could be good. We didn't really talk about NC State a lot. But this Wolfpack team, same thing. When I looked into it, they finished second in their respective division in the ACC. They finished 18th overall in the final rankings. So they're a very good football team. And this would be a big, big win for UCLA, regardless if the pedigree and the name maybe isn't quite as big. But I mean, they put out some good players. Bradley Chubb was a 5th overall pick just a few years ago from NC State. And you mentioned the quarterback play there that's been very strong, very solid. And I'm gonna have to do a lot more tape watching in the next 2 weeks leading up to this game. But game wise, I think it's going to be a really good one. I just think the name brand, it was a little bit of a letdown at first, but now that I look more into it, I think it is going to be a good game, and a Bruin Wolfpack matchup should be a lot of fun down at Petco Park. A lot of animals going on at Petco, right?
A lot, man. And this is a tough matchup for our secondary. We've struggled all year. We're in the hundreds again in secondary play. We got to do something about Azanero. But Devin Leary, we're going to have to probably match him throw for throw with DTR. It could be setting up for a final performance from Dorian Thompson-Robinson at Petco, and an epic one at that. Jamal, give me your thoughts on NC State. I think this is a fun matchup for UCLA and one they could build upon with a win.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ryan. It might not have the cachet of some of the other names that we had talked about, but NC State is the most underrated team in America, period. Wow. This is a team that's 9-3, ranked 18th, but if you really look and break down their schedule, they're the ones that beat Clemson first. Leary had some great throws in the fourth quarter overtime of that game. They're the ones who sort of took that aura of invincibility out of Clemson in the ACC this year. You look at their other three losses, one was very early in the non-conference, much in the same way Utah lost in the non-conference in the Pac-12 as they were finding themselves. If you look at their two conference losses, they lost by 1 to Miami at Miami, and they lost the season finale to Wake Forest by a field goal. This is a team that's 4 points away from being 11-1, and a team that, could have been a dark horse, sort of playoff fringe New Year's Six type team. And so this is the most underrated team in America. The Bruins are going to have their hands full. You talk about Devin Leary. He broke Phillip Rivers' school record for touchdown passes, 35 touchdown passes. This is a team that is a top 25 offense. There's about a 70-30 split in terms of passing yards versus rushing yards. So our secondary, our much maligned secondary over the course of this year is going to be heavily tested. They've got 3 wide receivers, each of whom have caught at least 6 touchdown passes this year. And this is going to be a game that UCLA is going to need to continue that consecutive streak of 40-plus point games. UCLA is not going to win this game being south of 40 points. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks at Petco. This is going to be an electric game. This might be one of those games where we look back and say, hey, this was one of the 5 best bowl games in bowl season. It's setting up that way to have a ton of highlights.
And it's got the perfect people to call it, too. We found out Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt are going to be in the house. I know Herbie and Fowler are great, but as a play-by-play broadcaster myself, nobody gets me more pumped on college football than Gus Johnson. He is a fan at the end of the day, and boy, he's got a legendary voice when it goes along with it. NC State, I was watching some of the tape. They were down 30-21 to North Carolina in their big rivalry game. Under 2 minutes left. Devin Leary leads them on this amazing comeback to get them to 9-3. It was an impressive performance by him. A lot of people are talking about Sam Howell coming in this year being a potential dark horse Heisman candidate from Carolina. Leary looked like the best quarterback on that field that night. So a lot to look forward with this. Watch out for their defense is the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with NC State. They're top 25 in yards per game allowed. And their 2 linebackers, Drake Thomas, here's a stat line for you. 99 tackles, 6 sacks, and 3 picks. When you're getting sacks and forcing turnovers, I mean, that's a pretty special player right there. And then they got Levi Jones, who also has 6 sacks, blitzing from the linebacker position, kind of used as a Bradley Chubb was at NC State. Fellas, we're wrapping it up. I'm thankful that you guys came on for this emergency pod. I'm looking forward to getting down to San Diego and having some beers down there.
Can't wait, Will. It's gonna be a blast. We'll be celebrating Chip Kelly being retained by UCLA and heading into next year with a bright future for this Bruins team. Can't wait.
And a big bowl win against a great NC State team. It's going to be nothing but good vibes in the holiday season for UCLA.
A big bowl win, Chip Kelly staying. That's all we can hope for, God willing. Bruin Bible.